was going to share a couple of thoughts with you based on our experience in the Centre for Effective Services over the last 3 years. But just briefly, for those of you who are not familiar with the Centre for Effective Services, we were established 3 years ago, and our basic purpose is to improve policy and services for children, families and communities. And we do that by working with others who are trying to do that. So be they policy makers, be they NGOs, be they statutory service providers. We work in the Republic of Ireland and in Northern Ireland. We're all island, and we're funded part by government and part by Philanthropy, and we're an NGO, an independent NGO. So I have about 6 different thoughts which are very loosely connected. So this is not a story with a beginning, a middle and an end, but hopefully it has a couple of useful pointers. And I'm going to focus in on the points that haven't already been made, because I would share a lot of the thoughts that have been made by others. So firstly, when we're talking about measuring impact, the term evidence comes up a lot. And in the Centre for Effective Services, we like to think about evidence in a broad rather than a narrow way. And we encourage others to do the same. And that means, so a definition we use of evidence is that evidence is the knowledge gained from integrating 3 things. One is research. The other is the professional judgment of practitioners and service providers. And the third thing is the service user experience. So I think that's an important backdrop for any discussion on measuring impact. The second point, and a number of others have made this, is that often measuring impact is seen as a tool for accountability and for organisations and services and projects to be accountable for the funding they have received, be it from a philanthropic foundation or from government or whoever. And that's obviously one useful reason to be interested in measuring impact. But we would encourage organisations and their funders to think about measuring impact for learning and development. And that's learning and development within the organisation, but it's also learning and development for the funders and the policy makers. So there is now, when there's a real focus on getting bang for our every euro, we still have euros, so bang for our euros. And obviously that's really important, and we're not saying that's not important, but it is important that there's a wider perspective in terms of impact, and that it focuses on the learning, be that for the policy, for the service, for the community. A number of the speakers have referred to the significant investment that's been made in measuring impact in prevention and early intervention in the children and young people sector in both the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland. And in fact, there have been investments by government in the Republic of Ireland and Atlantic Philanthropies in 32 different prevention and early intervention services across 16 different agencies. And they all have involved fairly serious forms of impact measurement. And one of the interesting tasks that has been asked of us in the Centre for Effective Services is to try to bring together the learning from across those 32 different sites and 16 organisations, with the view to informing, doing that last piece I was talking about that's important in terms of impact, which is to inform funders and policy makers. So we're in the middle of doing that now, and various reports and briefings will come out on that in the next 18 months. Sharing learning across sectors, I think that's really important in everything we do. But I think in terms of measuring impact, because impact is not sector specific, as we all know, most of the interventions, most meaningful interventions require inputs from various services, from various disciplines, are holistic, if you like. So it's important that we, as the players who are involved in developing and delivering the service and measuring them, that we share our learning. And I don't think we're very good at doing that yet in Ireland. I think there are efforts being made which are welcome, but I think we should be better at that. Implementation. You can have all the evidence you want about what's a good service, what's a good intervention. You can read about it, you can hear about it from the experts, but if you don't get the implementation right, you will never have impact. So when we're looking at measuring impact, We need to look at what's the evidence around the particular intervention, but we also need to look at what's the evidence around how it was implemented. Two final thoughts for you. Firstly, I noticed that in the blurb about the event today, there was something about social impact and evidence-based practice being still in development in Ireland. But let us take comfort from the fact that it's not just in Ireland that that's still in development. That is an international phenomenon. And actually we're learning, I would argue, just as quick as others are internationally. And what we can learn here, we need to feed out into that international learning just as we bring it in. And finally, a thought on semantics maybe. Do we talk about measuring impact or judging impact? Because I've heard people say that you can't always measure. Some things are very hard to measure impact, but you must be able to judge them. And if you can't judge that you're making an impact, then you probably aren't making an impact. But just to introduce that notion of that word judging impact, so I'll leave it with that. Thank you.